Okay, in the first video we looked at some of the general principles for building a web page or a wiki. In this video we'll look more deeply at the organization of that wiki. So what is it that makes a website easy to use or more difficult to use?
Whether it's easy or not, there are many factors. Let me give my personal website as an example. This website was constructed in 2010, a while ago. When I did this website, I, as the author of this website, just want to present my personal website as a CV, a paper CV, projected on the internet. So you can see this whole schema is very much like a CV.
So it's like a list of all of your publications and activities, but it's just one continuous page.
Right, you scroll down to find whatever information you want. So it's easier for me to do something like this when I want to add new information.
Right, it's just one page and you just add it in sequence.
Exactly. But this website is already out of date and it's no longer supported. My new personal website was constructed by my research assistant, who is a younger generation who knows the current model, the current schema of a contemporary website. So you can see my personal picture is no longer there. But on this page, we have moving pictures of all the Indonesian and the Filipino MOOCs that I've made, showcasing right there as advertisement. And they also have categories, so you can click on each category to see the details. So it's very much like I need to have drawers, so I can open the drawer and find everything in good files. But my preference is to put everything on the table so I can see, immediately where things are.
Just like the desktop on your computer that has hundreds of icons on it for all the different projects.
Exactly. So this new website has organization.
Right. So that's what I talked about in the last unit, about starting with a sitemap. Where are you going to put everything?
And of course, I cannot just please myself by making it easy for myself.
Right.
I have to see the audience and the language needs of my audience too. So my Yami language documentation projects, we established 3 websites by computer scientist Professor Yang Mengqian. So you can see, as a computer scientist, his design of our Yami project on the front page, wow, this is like a book cover. And you can click on either Chinese or English version.
And that's very important if you do have Chinese and English versions, to put both of those names there in the appropriate language. Because I've gone to some websites and they're in Chinese and they have an option to go to the English, but English is written in Chinese characters, Yingwen. And if I don't know Chinese, that really doesn't help me very much.
So after you click on either Chinese or English, then you go into this book and you can see it's organized very well. You can choose the category you're interested in. If you choose Yami corpus, then if you move into stories, you can see they are listed, as a document. All those stories you can choose. Click on the one you are interested in.
So this is a series. You have the Yami corpus, the stories, and then each individual story are at different sub-levels of your organization.
This is the English version. And for the Chinese, you can simply click on 中文版, Chinese. And that's just one example of the documentation. In the next one, we can see we also made a e-learning website. And this e-learning website, you can see the logo of Providence University, where I taught for 16 years in my early career. And this is, again, bilingual version. But unfortunately, when you construct a website, you have to face a difficulty, which is sometimes the software is no longer supported.
Right.
That's exactly the case. Adobe Flash Player is no longer supported. So all my learning activities and the simulation tests with the keys can no longer be used. But that's life.
Right.
Sometimes we say diamond is forever. Website is not forever.
That's for sure.
So you have to keep up with new software, new technology.
Yeah, so iGEM did the same thing. They had all of the websites, all of the past information about competitions on one server or one something. And then this past year, they decided we're going to go to a new system. And then they had to transfer all of that past material into this new system.
Yeah, but some things is no longer transferable.
Right,
It doesn't exist.
exactly.
But on the other hand, some adventure, some creation 10 years ago or 15 years ago was not popular. For example, the participatory wiki dictionary. 15 years ago, when Professor Yang Mengqian established this category for my Yami dictionary project to elicit new vocabulary words from the speech community, or he actually had ambition to elicit all 16 indigenous languages vocabulary so we can, contribute.
Compare, right.
It didn't work at that time. So even though this label is there, there's nothing in that category because it didn't work.
Right.
But lo and behold, now when the younger generation is interested in participating online, contributing vocabulary freely, willingly. So the newer version made by 族语一乐园, that's another indigenous e-learning website. You can see the 16 ethnic groups contributing vocabulary, new words to enrich their vocabulary system.
Very good.
And as we have developed more and more Yami language resources, recently I asked my collaborator, our research team member, Professor Zhang Huihuan, to make a website to put all the most current works there. Again, I want to make it, listing, use a listing style. So people can click on whatever item they're interested in and, make the link to that website. So you can see this is for both those who are interested in what's the current works and myself who is, who prefers to
A simple list.
a simple list than those fancy pictures.
So again, with the wiki, you have different standard pages. And as we said in the first video, the purpose of those pages is to convince the judges that you fulfill the criteria. So the best way to do that is not to put everything on one page, but in your standard pages to link other pages. So the other pages have the data, they have the full descriptions. Those are the ones that you write as you go, as you do the meeting, as you do the activity. And you need to include who, what, where, when, how, and why, so that all of that information is there in detailed form. But then the standard pages, as you get to the end, as you complete, then you go back and you link and you focus in those pages only on the criteria. We met the criteria by doing X, Y, and Z, and you have links to each of those activities that you participated in. So again, there are many possible organization styles, as we talked about, in terms of the number of main categories, the number of subcategories, and the way of moving between categories. So all of those you need to consider in your organization. So the first question is, where are you going to put your required pages? Will you mix them in under the main headings or keep them separate? In terms of mixing them in, here's an example where you could separate into your general information, wet lab, dry lab, and human practice, all of which are the sort of main categories for iGEM. And then within each, the ones in the black are non-standard. That's where you put your data. But then the ones shown in the red are ones that are the standard categories for the awards. And again, you only need those if you are trying to convince the judges that you are competing for that particular category. So this is one way of organizing it. But you could also put all of the award categories in one place. That makes it easier for the judges. And in fact, those that have won the best wiki have used this method because it's easy for the judges. They just go down this list. They don't need to find where that category is by searching for it. So this is a very good way of separating your data from the criteria and the standard pages that you're trying to convince the judges that you have fulfilled that criteria. So in the data pages, that's where I particularly suggest that you use sub-pages. So under lab, you would have different categories for the meeting to talk about your initial plan, the change after consulting with one of the advisors, the first test that you did. Oh, it failed. We went back to the advisor and got some more details and did it again. So each of those would have a separate entry in the wiki rather than combining them all on one page. That makes it easier to find and easier to link when you get to your standard pages. And again, I suggest also that you date those pages when that event happened. That makes it easy to find and cross-link. So in the data pages, again, you have all these subcategories. And then in the links, you may actually link some of those to two different places. For instance, if you had a consultation, it would be linked in the consultation page, but it could also be linked in an attribution page if that was a particularly important step in the process. Engineering could be listed under the engineering criteria as well as the implementation criteria. So by doing it this way, you avoid a lot of duplication. The 2022 team had a lot of duplication, as had some of the other teams. They had 3 different places where they described this web game that they created. One was the web game itself, but it was also described under education and communication. And so there was a lot of duplication of almost the same words on different pages. And that may, as you're trying to read through it, it's like, I've read this before, but well, not quite. It would be much easier to put all of that in one main page and then link the education and communication, which are the standard pages to convince the judges, to the main page showing the data for the web game. Similarly, for the human practices, in 2022, the human practices page primarily listed all of the consultations, all of the different people they had consulted. But it did not specifically address the criteria that the judges were looking for. And I think that hurt the team in terms of the judging in this case. Again, those standard pages should be more like an abstract. They just point to the main points that say, we will, on these other pages, you can look for the details, but here is why we met the criteria. That's a very important thing to remember in planning your wiki. So again, I suggest in terms of the files, set up very early on a standardized naming system for your files. That you have a particular format. You always put the date first, the sort of category, and then something specific, so that it's easy for everybody to follow the system and find it, and you know that you're always working on the latest version of something by the date. And again, finally, way to move from one page to another should be self-explanatory. It should be clearly marked so that people know, oh, there's something if I do this, rather than having to guess. For instance, the best wiki for 2022 showed all of the consultations on sort of a timeline with pictures of each person they consulted. And there's a little image there that says, to get more information, click on that image. And so those then become hyperlinks to that person, to that consultation. It's a very clear way to allow people to go back and forth between the individual consultation and the main page. So again, think about options as you're designing your wiki to make it easy for the judges to find the information that they want, and also interesting for people, because your generation likes to do these little clicks on people to find out what's going on. So think of both of your audiences. In the next video, we'll talk more about the importance of audience in the wiki.